So in this tutorial, I wanted to look at how to unwrap and bake multiple objects in Blender into a single texture file. Now the reasons you might want to do this, they could vary and there could be a lot of them. In my case, I have a windmill model that's got 4 different objects. I've got a base object here that's not going to move. I've got some fan blades that I might want to animate in my scene, and I've also got some gears down here that I might want to animate as well to go along with my fan blade. Now by keeping those objects separate, the animation is much easier and may actually be impossible if you don't keep the objects separate. And since I'm targeting Unity for this model, meaning I want to import this into Unity and use it in a game project, the fewer number of materials, the fewer number of texture files in my project, the faster my game is going to run, at least in general. So if I can combine all these objects, all their color information into a single texture, into a single material, my game's gonna run a little bit better. It also has the added advantage of keeping your project a little bit neater, a little bit tidier, because there's fewer files in it. So before we get going with that, I'm gonna open up a new window here, and I'm gonna choose the UV image editor. So now that I've done that, I wanna do one more thing to help tidy this up. I'm gonna select all of my objects, one at a time. I'm gonna select the base last. And the reason I wanna do that is to parent these objects. I wanna do this so that when I import this into Unity, all the objects are children of one object, just to keep my hierarchy kind of tidy. So I select all those, hit Control P, set the parent to object, and I'm gonna keep the transform. Once that's done, I'm gonna go into edit mode, and then down to mesh, UV Unwrap, Light Map Pack. Now Light Map Pack works really well, in my opinion, for typically flat shaded low poly models. If you're doing something fancier, if you're trying to line up your UVs with a texture, this is probably not the option you want. What the Light Map Pack does is it allows the computer to procedurally unwrap the model. Every face is separate from all other faces, and it just tries to arrange them in a way on the texture to maximize the amount of space that is used and minimize the amount of space that's wasted. So I'm going to choose that, and here are some options. We want to make sure that we've got the selected mesh object. We want to make sure we've done that. And then crucial here to getting multiple objects on one texture is this first toggle share texture, and this allows multiple objects to share the same texture. I'm going to leave the new UV map untoggled. I don't need to create a second channel of UVs. I am, however, going to create a new image. I'm going to do this with an image size of 1024. The default is generally 512. It depends on how much detail you want. I'm not too concerned about file size, so I'm going to stick with the 1024. The pack quality, this ranges from 0 or 1 to 48, 48 being the best quality. And what that does is the higher the pack quality, the harder the computer's going to work to minimize the space wasted on the texture file. Now, if your model is very complex, has a lot of faces, if you turn it all the way up, you could be looking at 20, 30 minutes, maybe even multiple hours for the unwrapping process, and your computer can likely go unresponsive. For my case here with this very simple model, putting it all the way up works quite well. The unwrapping process is very quick. The next option here is the margin, and the default value here is 0.1 usually. And this margin is how much space there is between the UV faces, and if that's too small, you can have colors bleed in from one face into another face. It doesn't look real good. In my experience, something in the neighborhood of 0.15 works pretty well and prevents bleeding. If you have bleeding from one face to another, just come back and unwrap your model again and increase the margin. So if I push OK, you can see that I've got a bunch of faces now in my UV image editor. So all 4 of those objects, the 2 shafts, the fan blades, and the base of this windmill have all unwrapped onto the same texture. Now I'm gonna select all of them once again. I'm gonna come over here to my camera, and I'm gonna come down to my bake options here. I found that the default settings work great for low poly models. The most important one here is the bake mode, and I wanna make sure that I'm baking a full render. If you click on that, you can see lots of different options. You can bake lots of different things into the texture, and that'll just depend on what you're trying to do. For my purposes, a full render works great. I'm gonna push bake, and you can see the texture getting built up by the computer as we go. If you look down here at the image menu, you can see an asterisk, which indicates we have unsaved data. Let's click on that, and we're gonna save as image. Now in my case, I'm trying to import this into a Unity project. You can see Blender is already trying to save this into my project. I've been working on some bolt tutorials, so that's why it's saving into that project. I'm gonna save this in my assets folder with a subfolder of textures. And then I'm gonna name this windmill texture. So that's going to save directly into my Unity project. I'm not going to have to import it. It's done. The next step we need to do here is duplicate our model. Now the reason we want to do that is when we import this into Unity, we don't want our model in our scene to have all the different materials that are present here. If I click over here on my materials tab, you can see that I've got 3 different materials, and I don't need that many. All my color information is saved on this PNG texture file. So I'm gonna duplicate my model, I'm gonna slide it over, and then I'm gonna go through and remove all of the materials on those objects. Once I've done that, I'm gonna create a new material, and I'm gonna call this windmill. So I need to make sure that all of my objects have that same material. I can do that in Unity, but I can save a little bit of time to do that. So what I'm gonna do is box select, make sure I got all those objects. If I come over here to this option, I can copy materials to others. Now this is particularly helpful if you have lots of different objects you're trying to copy the material into. It's pretty tedious to go through each object and select the material. So I'm gonna select that option, and then just to check real quick, my shaft down here has got my windmill. This has got my windmill. They've all got the windmill texture or the windmill material on them. Next, we're gonna save this blend file directly into our project. Again, I've been working on a bolt tutorial, so it's already got my models folder selected, and I'm gonna save it as windmill.blend. Now, saving a blend file directly into your project has pros and cons. Unity is going to deal with the import. It's going to create an FBX file that you can drag into your scene. If you need to adjust your model, you can go back into Blender, make some adjustments, save the file, go back into Unity, and those files will be re-imported. It does tend to streamline things. There are some downsides to it in that your project tends to bloat a little bit. I've also read that there's potential downsides if you're collaborating with somebody and they don't have Blender on their computer. I haven't experienced that problem. What I found is that saving the files directly into my project streamlines things, makes things quicker, reduces the number of files that I have to deal with on my computer or in my project. Here in Unity, let's go to our models folder, drag in our windmill, and you can see that both windmills got imported, and that's because, again, I saved the blend file directly to the project. So if I open up the object in the hierarchy, we can see that this first object here only has one material. It has that windmill material. If I click on the second object, you can see that it's got multiple materials. It's got the wood, metal, and the fan blades on it. So I'm gonna delete that object because I don't need it. I don't care about breaking the prefab instance. If I open this up, you can see all my different objects here all have the same material. If you come down here into the shader, you can see that you can't really adjust your settings. There's not much you can do. I can't change my tint. I can't change my settings at all. Now, that's not what I wanna do. I wanna be able to make some changes here. So I'm gonna create a new folder here. I'm gonna call it materials. And in there, I'm gonna create a new material. I'm gonna call it windmill. And here, in my albedo channel, I wanna grab my windmill texture, something like that. Then what I'm gonna do is take that new windmill material and drag it into each of my objects so that it's gonna use this new windmill texture that I created. And again, the reason I'm doing that is so that I can edit the settings of this material and of the shader. So if I now open this up, you can see that I now have the option to change these settings. With low poly models, I like to turn the smoothness all the way down. I think shiny low poly models generally don't look very good. The other thing I like to do is turn on the emission just a little bit. So I'm gonna toggle this option here, and then I'm gonna choose to drop in the same texture for my albedo into this emission channel. I'm gonna click there, go to windmill. Now, that's way brighter than I want, so I'm gonna click on the color selection, and I'm simply going to bring this down a bit until I get something that I like. So that's my general process for importing a model into Unity from Blender. I think it looks pretty good. I think the coloring looks pretty good. And as an added bonus, all my color information is kept in one material and one texture file. So I hope that was helpful. Hope that can help you with your project. If you got comments, questions, leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and I hope you'll join me for my next video.